Hey, welcome back to Silent Screams. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because tonight's story is something you won't want to miss. For those of you who love camping or have spent nights under the stars, this one might hit a little too close to home. Just imagine, miles away from civilization, no cell service, and only the thin fabric of your tent separating you from whatever lurks in the darkness. You thought you were safe. You thought you were alone. This story was sent to us by someone who swore they would never go camping again after what they experienced. I don't blame them. Grab your blanket, dim the lights, and let's dive into tonight's tale. True creepy horror stories, bone-chilling camping trip horror stories that will keep you awake. It was supposed to be a quick weekend getaway. Just a couple of nights in the woods with a few friends. We needed a break, something to escape the grind of everyday life. No cell phones, no internet, just nature. It was me, my girlfriend Hannah, and our friends Jake and Lily. We've been talking about doing something like this for months, so when the opportunity came, we jumped at it. Jake knew a spot. He called it off the beaten path, which was his way of saying it was far enough into the woods that we wouldn't run into anyone else. Perfect for a quiet, peaceful weekend, or so we thought. We loaded up the car with everything we'd need: tents, sleeping bags, food, and of course a lot of beer. We were ready for a good time. The drive out was uneventful. It took us a few hours, and by the time we arrived at the trailhead, it was already late afternoon. Jake led the way as we hiked deeper into the woods. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for us. I don't know why, but I remember feeling uneasy even then. Maybe it was just the isolation, or maybe it was something else. "Are we almost there?" Hannah asked, her voice a little shaky. She wasn't usually one to complain, but I could tell she was getting nervous. "Just another mile or two," Jake said, grinning. "You'll love it once we're there." He was right, in a way. When we finally reached the spot, it was beautiful. A small clearing surrounded by towering trees, with a creek running nearby. The sound of the water was soothing, and for a moment, I forgot about the weird feeling I'd had. We set up our tents, built a fire, and settled in for what we thought would be a relaxing evening. We laughed, drank, and told stories. Jake was the kind of guy who loved sharing ghost stories, but none of us took them seriously. Not yet, anyway. "Did you guys hear about the couple that disappeared out here last year?" Jake asked, his eyes glinting in the firelight. Jake stopped. Lily groaned, rolling her eyes. "You always do this." "No, seriously," he insisted, leaning in. "They were camping not too far from here. Never made it back. Search parties found their camp, but they were gone. No signs of a struggle. No footprints leading away. Just gone." "Come on, man." I laughed, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping back into my gut. "You're full of it." But Jake wasn't laughing. His expression had changed. He stared into the fire, his voice dropping to a low, almost conspiratorial tone. "I'm not kidding, dude. People around here say the woods aren't safe after dark. They say there's something out here. Something that watches." I don't know if it was the alcohol or just the way he said it, but a chill ran down my spine. The fire suddenly didn't seem so warm anymore, and the shadows beyond the clearing felt much closer than they had before. Hannah moved closer to me, her hand gripping my arm. "Okay, enough with the ghost stories," she said, forcing a laugh. "Let's just enjoy the night." We tried. We really did. But the atmosphere had changed. The wind had picked up, rustling through the trees, and every little noise felt wrong. It was like the forest itself was alive, breathing around us, watching. By midnight, we were all ready to crash. I crawled into the tent with Hannah, pulling the sleeping bag up around us. But sleep didn't come easy. The wind outside had picked up even more, howling through the trees, and every few minutes I'd hear a snap or a crunch from somewhere in the woods. At first, I told myself it was just animals. Maybe a deer or a raccoon. But then the sounds got closer. The snapping branches were no longer coming from random directions. They were circling us, slowly, deliberately. "Hannah," I whispered, shaking her gently. She groaned and rolled over, still half asleep. "Hannah, wake up. Do you hear that?" She sat up groggily, listening. For a few seconds there was silence, and then a low, guttural growl somewhere just outside the tent. Her eyes widened in terror. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I whispered back, my heart pounding. "But it's close." I reached for my flashlight, fumbling with it as I unzipped the tent just enough to peek outside. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but I couldn't see anything, just trees and shadows. The growling stopped, replaced by heavy, deliberate footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, like something was stalking us. "Jake," I hissed, trying to get his attention without being too loud. "Jake, wake up." No response. "Jake." I called again, louder this time. Nothing. The footsteps were getting closer now. Closer, and then silence. It was the kind of silence that presses in on you, that makes your ears ring because you know something's wrong. And then, scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was dragging its claws along the outside of our tent. Hannah was frozen beside me, her eyes wide with fear. I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast. My own heart was racing, pounding in my chest so hard I thought it might explode. And then the scratching stopped. Just like that. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of movement, but all I heard was the wind again, whistling through the trees. I sat there for what felt like hours, waiting for something to happen. Finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I zipped the tent the rest of the way open and stepped outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face. I shone the flashlight around, scanning the trees. Nothing. There was no sign of whatever had been outside our tent. But then, I noticed something. Footprints. Big, deep prints in the dirt, circling our camp. They weren't human. Whatever had been out here was big. Too big. I hurried over to Jake and Lily's tent, unzipping it and shaking them awake. "Jake, Lily, get up. Something's out here." Jake groaned, rubbing his eyes. "What are you talking about, man?" "There's something out here," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something I'm not, right?" He sat up, frowning. "What do you mean, not right?" I gestured toward the ground outside their tent. "Look for yourself." Jake stepped out, squinting at the footprints. His face went pale. "What the hell?" Lily poked her head out of the tent, eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" "I don't know," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't think we should stick around to find out." We packed up as quickly as we could, the tension thick in the air. None of us said it out loud, but we all knew something was watching us. Something wasn't going to let us leave without a fight. As we hiked back through the woods, the sound started again. That same growling, the snapping of branches, the heavy footsteps following us. But this time, it wasn't staying in the shadows. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. Something tall. Something not human. At one point, I swear I saw glowing eyes staring at us from the trees, but when I turned to look, they were gone. The feeling of being watched never left. It grew stronger, more oppressive, like the forest itself was closing in on us. We kept moving faster now, but no matter how far we went, the sounds followed. I could hear Hannah breathing heavily beside me, fear etched across her face. Jake and Lily were just as terrified, their eyes darting around, trying to figure out what was stalking us. And then, without warning, Jake stopped dead in his tracks. Did you hear that? We all froze listening. There it was again, a whisper. Faint, almost too quiet to hear, but unmistakable. Leave. My blood ran cold. Did that just say? Before I could finish, something darted out of the trees, a blur of movement too fast to track. Lily screamed, and then she was gone, yanked into the darkness faster than I could process what happened. 1 second she was there, and the next gone. Just like Jake's story. We bolted, running as fast as we could, but the footsteps were right behind us. The growling grew louder, closer, like whatever it was toying with us. I didn't dare look back. We made it back to the car, panting and shaking. But Lily, she was gone. We never found her. I don't remember much about that drive home. Jake was behind the wheel, his face pale and hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel tighter than I'd ever seen him before. The forest loomed outside the car windows, dark and endless, the trees stretching high like they were watching us, like they knew we had seen something we weren't supposed to. Hannah sat beside me in the back seat, staring blankly ahead. Her hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. All I could think about was Lily. She was gone, snatched into the night like she had never existed. 1 second she was with us, alive, breathing, terrified, and the next it was like the forest swallowed her whole. The blur of movement, that horrible guttural growl, and then nothing. My heart ached thinking about it, but what could we have done? What could we do now? Go back in there? Search for her? The truth was, none of us had the guts to even think about going back. We ran like cowards, abandoning our friend. It wasn't until we'd been driving for at least an hour that someone finally broke the silence. Should we call the police? Hannah's voice was small, barely a whisper. It felt strange to hear her speak after so long in silence, like we had all been waiting for someone to acknowledge what had happened. Yeah, Jake mumbled, his eyes fixed on the road. But what do we tell them? That something took her? Do you think they believe us? Do you believe us? I shot back, my voice shaking. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We saw what happened, Jake. We can't just pretend like it didn't. I'm not saying we're pretending, man. I'm just saying, what if they think we did something to her? We're the only witnesses. No one's going to believe a story about monsters in the woods. Shut up. Hannah snapped, her voice cracking. Tears filled her eyes, and she pulled her hand from mine, wrapping her arms around herself. Just shut up. Lily's gone, okay? We have to do something. I wanted to comfort her, but there was nothing I could say. The truth was too horrifying. What could I say? That we had left Lily behind? That whatever took her might still be following us? The car's headlights cut through the night, but I could still feel the presence of the woods pressing in on us. It was as if the forest was still watching, still waiting. Then the road started to blur. No, it wasn't just the road, the world outside the car. The trees seemed to sway unnaturally, bending, twisting, like they were changing shape. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but it wasn't just me. Jake's breathing had grown faster, and I could see sweat trickling down his forehead. What the hell? he muttered, his eyes darting to the side of the road. "Do you guys see that?" I looked where he was staring, and my stomach dropped. The trees, they weren't trees anymore. They looked like figures tall and thin, with long arms stretching down to the ground, their faces hidden in the dark. For a second, I thought it was just a trick of the light. But then one of them moved. "Drive faster," I whispered, gripping the seat in front of me. "Jake, just go. Go now." He slammed on the gas, and the car lurched forward, the engine roaring as we sped down the winding road. But the figures, they were still there, standing at the edge of the trees, watching us, following us. I could feel their eyes, cold, calculating. They weren't human. They couldn't be. But the worst part? They knew we were scared. And they enjoyed it. "What are they?" Hannah whimpered, curling up tighter against the door, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I whispered, not sure if I was answering her or myself. Just then, something darted across the road, right in front of the car. Jake swerved hard, narrowly avoiding it, but we spun out, the tires screeching against the pavement. The car skidded off the road and into the trees, slamming to a stop. My head hit the window hard, and for a second I saw stars. When the world stopped spinning, I realized we had come to a halt in a ditch. The headlights flickered and then died, leaving us in near total darkness. The only light was the faint glow of the moon through the trees, casting long, distorted shadows across the forest floor. No one moved for what felt like an eternity. We just sat there, stunned, breathing heavily. "I'm sorry," Jake finally muttered, his voice shaky. Whatever that thing was, I didn't see it until it was too late." "It's okay," I said, even though it clearly wasn't. Let's get out of here." We all scrambled out of the car, our eyes darting around the darkness. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight, but I had no signal. Not that it mattered. We needed to get back to the main road. We needed help. As we started to walk back up the embankment, that growling sound returned. Low, deep, rumbling, coming from behind us. I froze, my heart racing. "Guys," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Do you hear that?" Jake and Hannah stopped, turning to face the dark woods behind us. The growling grew louder, more intense, like whatever was making the noise was right on top of us. And then, I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes, deep red, appeared in the shadows. They blinked once, slowly, and then something stepped out from behind the trees. It was tall, much taller than any human, its body impossibly thin and elongated. Its skin was a sickly gray, stretched tight over its bones. Long, twisted limbs hung down from its body, almost touching the ground. But its face was the worst part. It didn't have a mouth, just smooth, featureless skin where its mouth should have been. And those eyes, they stared at us with a kind of hunger, a malevolent intelligence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "What the hell is that?" Jake gasped, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I could do was stare, frozen in place, as the thing began to move toward us, its limbs bending in unnatural ways. It moved slowly, almost deliberately, like it was toying with us. "Run!" I finally screamed, grabbing Hannah's hand and pulling her up the embankment. Jake followed close behind, and we sprinted toward the road, our feet pounding against the dirt. But I could hear it behind us, those horrible wet footsteps, and the low, guttural growl that never seemed to stop. We burst out onto the road, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The car was still there, dark and silent, but there was no time to go back. We had to keep running. I didn't dare look behind me. I didn't want to see how close it was. But then Jake screamed. I whipped around just in time to see the thing grab him, one long, clawed hand wrapping around his ankle. It yanked him off his feet, dragging him back toward the trees. No, I shouted, rushing forward, but Hannah held me back, screaming at me to keep running. I wanted to help him, but deep down, I knew it was too late. Jake was gone. We ran. We ran for what felt like hours, until my legs burned and my lungs ached. The sounds of the creature behind us grew fainter and fainter, and eventually they disappeared altogether. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not until we reached the main road. When we finally stumbled out onto the asphalt, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. Hannah fell beside me, sobbing uncontrollably. We had made it. But Jake and Lily, I don't know how long we sat there, waiting for someone to find us. Eventually, a car pulled up, a trucker, by the looks of it. He got out and rushed over to us, asking if we were okay. What had happened? But I couldn't explain. How could I? How could I tell him about the thing in the woods, about Jake and Lily, about the eyes that were still watching us even now? The police came, and we told them as much as we could without sounding insane. They searched the woods, but they never found any trace of Jake or Lily. No footprints, no signs of a struggle. Just nothing. Like they had never been there at all. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that Hannah and I moved on with our lives and left that nightmare behind. But the truth is, we'll never leave it behind. Not really. Sometimes at night, I still hear the growling. Low, deep, echoing in the back of my mind. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see those glowing red eyes staring back at me, waiting. We got away, but the forest doesn't forget. And I know deep down that it's only a matter of time before it comes for us again.